Okay, good morning, everybody. So this is everybody hear me well? We're still out. Okay,
Nope, you're perfect.
okay, thank you. So, good morning, everybody. Uh, Today we are here talking about growing abundant food gardens in New York State. It's a pleasure for me to be talking about this. I am Christian Acosta, agriculture educator from Cornell Cooperative Extension. And well, let's start. Let's see what is this class about. So this is the agenda for today. We have an introduction about food all year round, abundant crops, some recommendations, and let's start because we have a lot to see today. And well, first, when we have a warm weather, so it's easy to be growing all year round. So if we're growing in Florida, in some of these tropical areas, we don't have any problem about growing all year round. But when it's New York State, so of course we can have just extreme temperatures in a short time. So we can be just very hot in the summer with 90 degrees or more, and then less than 6 months we have -5. So of course the plants also they suffer these changes and they cannot they don't tolerate these changes. So this doesn't mean that we cannot produce a lot of food in all year round, or just produce a lot in the months that it's possible to be growing our food and then storing this food to have food all year round. So yeah, definitely it's possible. Let me see here. This always okay. So why to be growing abundant food gardens? So in the so some tips to be growing in a cold weather like New York State is that we can pick the easiest and abundant plants. When we are talking about abundant, it means that it produces a lot. So just from one plant, we can produce a lot of plants, or they are just easy and they are not too picky about temperature and everything. So um, we can be planting more plants in a small area, and this also help us to just save some money and just less trips to the grocery store. And also it's a way to fight inflation because now everything is getting too expensive. And also, like all of us probably, we are impressed about this, that I was comparing just in my personal experience, comparing just no longer ago, just 2020, and the same grocery list, because I'm a routine guy, so I don't change too much from recipes and all this. So the same grocery list that now is three times more, and it's going even up and up. So this is why we are talking about food gardens and keep growing our own food. Is a way to fight inflation, and it's also a way to eat healthier. So something that I always mention, even in my personal life, is that we need to see the positive thing even when something looks so negative. So this is something bad, that if before there is a lot of people with being hungry with hunger, so now imagine now with the prices going up and up and up. So same time, this is just a challenge that these times are making us make these decisions and start growing our own food. Even when we don't know about that, we can still keep learning, and these are the spaces to be learning about that, and also to be eating healthier. So okay, when we are just growing our own food, well, we don't put a lot of chemicals to preserve the food. We don't put a lot of pesticides and a lot of things that we can be um, eating with the products that we can get from the grocery stores. So easy and abundant plants. So something that I was picking, just choosing what plants to be talking about today, is something easy and that same time can produce a lot. So The next ones that I'm going to show you, they are just easy. Even if you think that you have a black thumb, that is what some people think that, oh no, I have a black thumb, it means that I kill everything that I bring home. So it doesn't mean that you have an hex or that bad luck or energy or something like that. It's just that you don't know how to make them, like how to keep them alive, or how to produce this a lot of food, a lot of vegetables. It's just that we are learning, and just from the mistake we can learn. So this is why you can start with these plants that I'm going to show you. So the first one is potatoes. And the potatoes are abundant, are considered abundant because uh, from just one plant you can be having around 1 to 2 pounds of potatoes. So you have multiple plants, well, you have a lot of potatoes around. Something that nice about this one is that once they are harvested, you can just keep them fresh, and they can be for long periods of time, and they can last for a couple of weeks, sometimes a month, 2 months. It depends, well, the humidity, temperature in your house, but they can last for a long time, just fresh. Also, you can process them and save them frozen. Well, in different ways you can preserve potatoes, and this is a lot. Sometimes you can be like with a lot of potatoes, so it's an abundant plant. They are not too hard to grow, and even if you are indoors, you are going to grow potatoes, and you think that, oh, it's indoors, it's in my apartment, I cannot grow potatoes. So you can still grow if you make sure that you have the light, even if it's artificial light. And just my recommendation is a tall um, pot. So because of course the potatoes grow in the ground, so they need some space to be growing, but it's definitely possible to be growing also in a container, in a pot. And now is the time to be planting potatoes. So you now 2 to 4 weeks before the last frost, and when the soil is at least 40 degrees Fahrenheit, now is the time to be growing potatoes. So more or less like 60 to 90 days after planting, you can have your start harvesting your own potatoes. Something that is not mandatory, but you should be doing is plant rotation for 2 years. What it means? So it means that if you plant potatoes in this space of the garden this year, next year you're going to plant something totally different than potatoes or the same family. What is the same family? Tomatoes, peppers, eggplants. Uh, so all kind of peppers, all kind of tomatoes, eggplants, they are the same family. So just something totally different, because pests or diseases, they can be like, oh, year by year they can be like resistant, and it's harder to control over the years. So doing plant rotation, we are avoiding this problem. So for example, if you plant potatoes here in this corner of the garden this year, next year you can plant the potatoes in another area of your garden or another pot. And now in this place where the potatoes were last year, you can be planting squash, for example, squash, or just something, or herbs, something totally different. So you are not going to have problems with pests or diseases. Another easy one is beans. So green beans or just the red beans. There are multiple varieties or beans, and this is just easy to start from seeds. Now you can start growing your beans indoors, and then you can move them outdoors, and they are just easy to grow. So there are um, two different plants. So the ones that they are the bush, that they just keep growing, and if you put a rope or you put it close to a fence, they just keep growing and growing around it. And another one that is just the pole, they just reach the some height, and that's it, they just keep growing like that. And it's easy, you don't need to be like applying a lot of pesticides or something like that. And once you start harvesting, is some of these nice plants, because you can be harvesting every week or every 2 weeks. It's not, for example, potatoes, that once you harvest, you just pull the plant and that's it. That's the end. So now with the beans, you can be harvesting it and just keep harvesting until the plant just gets weak, and or we have the cold weather again, and okay, the plant dies. So per plant, you can be having about, if it's the bush, you can be having about half pound per plant, and you can keep, like I mentioned, you can keep harvesting. And if it's the plants that they are just a pole, they produce more. You can have about 1 pound of beans per plant. So if we start doing the math, it's a lot. It's abundant. If you have multiple plants in your garden, so you're going to have more beans, and you can store it fresh. You can keep eating every time that you're harvesting. You can eat them, or you can dry them. You also can can well, preserved in canned or jars, and also frozen. And they can be long time in the freezer, and they are perfectly to use. And then when to plant this? So right now is the time. And if you are going to plant directly in the garden, so make sure that it's at least 48 degrees, the soil is at least 48 degrees Fahrenheit. And once you start planting, about the warmer, so the faster they are growing. So 45, 60 days after planting, you start collecting, you start harvesting your beans. Now, another easy one, the peas. The snow peas or just the typical the sweet pea. Also easy to start from seeds, and you can, once you start harvesting, you can eat them fresh, you can preserve dry, frozen, or in a can or canned or jars. And just to start growing these ones, they can tolerate some cold. So now is the time, the time to be planting these peas. Early spring, about 45 degrees, the soil, if you're planting outside, make sure that is at least 45 degrees Fahrenheit, and you can start growing. These ones, they don't like too much like direct sunlight, something that I forgot to just mention here. So if it's some shade area in the garden, that's why I mentioned that they can tolerate some cold, like right now in the spring, they are fine if the temperature is at least 45 degrees in the soil. And they grow fast. So 55 to 65 days after planting, you can be harvesting your peas, and then keep harvesting. So don't pull the plant just because they have some peas in there. No, you can keep collecting the peas. It's about a quarter pound per plant per week. And because they don't take a lot of space if we compare, for example, with squash. So this plant is small, so it doesn't take a lot of space. So you can plant more plants around, and you can keep producing more peas. So that's another one. Another easy one is the pumpkins. So something nice about pumpkins is, well, it's easy to grow. It's similar to the squash. They just keep growing a lot. And this is some typical mistake, that's something that we can do, is planting too many plants in a small area, and just from one plant they just keep growing and growing and covering a lot of space in the garden. So just one of the advices is start small, and you can preserve it fresh, frozen. Something nice about pumpkins is that you can use everything from the pumpkin, with the exception of the stem. So of course, you're not going to eat the stem, but the rest of the pumpkin you can eat them. You can blend it, or just boil it and make sure that it's just soft, or just blend it and make a soup with that. So you can use everything from the pumpkin. Also the seeds, you can toast the seeds, and this is something that also have a medicinal effect, especially for men. There is something, the pumpkin seeds are good for the prostate, so also for men's health, that is not only nutritional, also can be medicinal. uh, each plant can have 3 to 5 pumpkins, and it can be more than that, because of course we have a big variety of pumpkins that we can be growing here in New York State. So you just this is something nice that I was trying to remember, and yeah, this is something nice that we can do, is that it's not boring the same pumpkin year by year, because we have a big variety. So you can be this year growing a small pumpkin, next year can be growing a different variety of pumpkin. So this is something that you have some variety to be planting. Similar to pumpkins is the squash. So squash is also very easy to grow from seeds, and you can use everything from the squash, with the exception, of course, of the stem. And you can be planting summer squash, winter squash. You can preserve it frozen in jars. You can also just leave the squash on the counter, and sometimes they can be for months in there and not having bacteria or fungus, nothing. They just can be perfectly to use in there for months. So this is something nice about it, and it's also highly nutritional, and they grow a lot. So for example, just one example from here is the yield for butternut squash, and butternut squash can have about 5 to 25 pounds per plant. Just one plant can produce sometimes 20 to 25 pounds. So this is something nice about this one. So we can be producing a lot of food just with one single plant. This is why it's also considered abundant. So now with carrots, we have well, probably you're wondering, but well, carrots, they produce just one carrot per plant. So it's not like one plant can produce a lot, like potatoes, squash, peas, the ones that we are talking before. So in the case of carrots, yeah, it's just one carrot per plant, and we are going to see another examples like this. And something nice about this one is that they grow vertical, so they don't take too much space. Horizontal, you can put more plants in a small area. So this is why you can be planting a lot of carrots in a small area. You don't need like a big area, like for example for corn or another crops that they demand bigger areas. Something nice with carrots, and it's also a way to keep food in our house, is that you can have them in the refrigerator for months, sometimes for months, and they are perfectly okay. They last for long time, and you can save it in the freezer, for example, canned in a jar, frozen, or just fresh, and they are always sweet and they feel fresh. So the time to be is planting this one is right now. So you can start from now, from the spring to summer. Of course, the warmer, so the better for them to be growing. And one of the recommendations here is a typical mistake, and why some people, they don't like to grow carrots, and it's like, oh, they grow a lot, they grow beautiful, just the greens are beautiful, but then you pull the carrot and it's just a tiny carrot. So this is a common mistake, especially when we just plant a lot of seeds, that the carrot seeds, they are tiny ones. So we can easily fall into the mistake about planting too many carrots. And when they start growing, and if you just leave them there growing, so of course there's a lot of competition, and there is a lot of greens growing, but nothing in the ground. So this is why it's important to just one single plant. You just at least keep 2 to 3 inches between each plant. And if there is a lot growing, just pull some of the seedlings when they start growing, and make sure that there is just one growing in that spot. And if you're growing in a row, so between every row, so about 12 to 18 inches between each row. So in this way, you can start growing carrots, and if you also, you can be growing in a pot. Same recommendation like for the potatoes, just a tall pot, a tall pot, not a small, a typical one that you get. Just a bigger one now that they are producing the plastic ones, so they are cheaper, so they are not too expensive. And about 60 to 80 days after planting, you can be harvesting your carrots. And so, of course, the yield is just one carrot per plant. Same happens with the beets. So we consider beets also like a abundant plant because we can eat the whole plant. You can eat the greens and you can eat the bulbs. So the most typical, common is of course the bulbs because they are sweet and they are delicious. You can just make multiple recipes with these ones. Also, they last for a long time in the refrigerator. You can save just fresh, or you can cut and froze them and freeze them, and also in a jar or in a can. So you can preserve the beets, and you just try. That's the best recommendation right now. You is try the leaves, for example, if you like in a soup, if you like just in a salad, if just try to see if you like it, and in what recipe, like how you can cook them to make it like nice. There is no problem about that. They are not toxic. They don't produce any side effects if you eat the leaves, so you can eat the whole plant. And when to start growing? So before the last frost, about 1 month before the last frost. So now we can be planting our beets, and when the soil is about 50%, 50 degrees Fahrenheit or higher, and they take a little bit more time, so about 55 to 75 days after planting, you can be harvesting your your beets. So of course, one beet per plant. And well, so here I'm gonna check and answer something here from the chat. So, good way to start veggies from what otherwise? Well, this is a link. Eh, I cannot open this link right now because I will pull out of this one. What is this? So question for Jeff. So what is the that way to grow the veggies?
Sorry, that was a link to a Facebook post that I saw this morning, and it's a
Yes.
way to start veggies using the tops of root vegetables to sprout them.
Yeah.
I'll see if I can find another way, but it looks really cool, and it's a way to use the scraps to help to start plants without having to start them from seed.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. I was forgetting this for the well with carrots, not much, but with beets, for example, onions, you can start growing the plant not only from seed because of course starting from seed, yeah, it's possible and it's going to take just more time. So if you can just cut, for example, here we have this. Okay, here, this example of this beet. So cutting just the top of the plant, and you put it back in the ground, making sure that is moist, and uh, it's sometimes not always, but most of these plants they just start growing again. Same happens with the onions. So just small onions, you can see the bulbs that you can find also these bulbs in the grocery stores. But when you're growing by yourself, you can be collecting some of these bulbs just to have like seeds, and and then when it's the time to be planting, you just put the bulbs and they just start growing. So you are saving couple weeks just waiting the plant to be growing from seeds. So thank you about that question because yeah, definitely this is a way that you can be saving even weeks about between waiting the seed to sprout and keep growing, or just having the bulb and putting directly the bulb, the potato or the onion, the beet, directly the tops or the bulbs directly on the ground, and they just keep growing. So yeah, that's like a life hack in this case for the gardening, and an easy way. And it's not it's a common way to do it. So if you have the patience to start growing indoors and you really want, because some people they really like to be growing the seeds and just making sure that everything is going from the seed and growing. So that's totally valid, and this is what we're talking about, starting from seed. But commercially, even the bulbs are pretty popular too. So thank you about that one. And now another one that we consider an abundant plant, even when it's just one onion per plant, is, well, onion, like I was mentioning, and it's easy to grow, and it's also abundant because you can eat. It doesn't matter if it's the green onion or just this onion, like we can see here in this example. You can eat the greens, you can eat the whole plant, so there is no side effects. Of course, the greens are not that rich in the flavor like the bulb, because all the nutrients and everything is going to the bulb. So, but it doesn't mean that you cannot eat the greens. And yeah, you can eat the greens. Any recipes that you prefer, you can now start just playing in the kitchen with this, same with the beets leaves. And this is also easy to preserve and dry, so like the dry onion or as a powder, canned, dry, frozen. You can be preserving, and they can last even just fresh on the counter. They can be for a couple of days to a couple of weeks sometimes, perfectly. And so this is a way to be producing our own onions. This where to start growing the bulbs. If it the seeds, so of course it's going to take more time, and the bulbs, of course, you can start planting right now in the spring, before the last frost, and when the soil is at least 30, 30 degrees Fahrenheit, so they are okay with the cold temperature right now. Of course, if it's not in the negative, well, when we're talking in Celsius, negative Celsius, in this case, like less than 30 degrees Fahrenheit, and 100 to 125 days. So, of course, the longer the time, so the bigger the onion. Here in New York State, probably you're not going to see like a big, huge onion like you can see in the grocery store. But for example, this one looks huge here in the picture, but it's just about 2 to 3 inches. So probably here in New York State is going to be small onions. They are going to be small, but you, like I was mentioning, you can eat the greens and you can eat the whole plant. Another abundant one is the garlic. So it's easy to grow, and also you can eat the greens, you can eat the whole plant. You can preserve the onion fresh, dry, frozen. Uh, for this one, you can plant in the fall, or yeah, just between the middle of September to October, and then they are fine on over the winter. They can overwinter, and then you can start harvesting between spring and summer next year. This is abundant because they produce a lot. So they produce one plant, produce one bulb. But if you're saving like seeds, so just one bulb can have about 10 to 20 new bulbs. So for this one, it's easy to grow just like that, just like the little bulbs of the garlic. And sometimes you can see this process in your kitchen, um, when they are just on long time on the counter, and they just keep growing now a new plant from there. So that you can eat that. If you want, you can eat that green plant that is growing and nothing happens. There is not toxic. And if you want, you can just put it on the ground and they just keep growing. Now about greens. So we have the greens, and when we are talking about greens, where we are not, I'm not talking now just one by one because we have multiple in this section, and of course we don't have much time. So kale, arugula, lettuce, the chard, Swiss chard, celery, spinach. Probably I'm forgetting some here. The greens are easy to grow. Something that usually greens have is that they like a little bit of cold. So we have this advantage that they don't need like uh, 80, 90 or more degrees to be growing. So right now we can start growing our greens too. For example, for kale, they just grow a lot in this area in New York State. So something about greens is that they are not so easy to preserve. They are not nice like freezing the kale or arugula. So when you're going to eat them, it's not fresh. Definitely these ones you need to eat fresh to feel that crunchy texture. So for these ones, there is an option that is just or keep eating, producing a lot because they grow a lot. That's why they are today in this presentation as an abundant plant. They keep growing a lot, and you can keep eating in these months where like spring, summer, the end of the summer, the beginning of the fall, and just keep eating the greens. Or also you can be growing indoors because this is something about, for example, lettuce, spinach, or some of these plants that you can be growing indoors. And now, well, I didn't include a picture about the growing towers. That's the name. That is a hydroponic system that you can be growing arugula, growing lettuce, so you can be growing your salad. um, all year round because they are indoors and they have the light and everything, but of course they are more pricey. But over the time, it's pricey in the beginning because they last for many years, and over the time, if you do the math, they are not going to be that expensive if they are going to be producing your own food all year round. So with greens, this is like a hack that we can do for specifically for the winter months, the cold months. So this is something that we can be growing. Same with the herbs. So the herbs, same. We can be growing in the warmer time of the year. And there are some herbs that they are very picky about temperature and everything. Like the basil, for example, is one of the ones that too much water and it start dying. Uh, if it's dry, then the plant also is dry, so it's very susceptible to changes. So it's not easy to grow always, but once you just get the practice, the now you can be growing a lot of basil, especially in the warmer time of the year. So in the summer, you can see that the basil, you can have a lot of basil. Something nice about these herbs, basil, rosemary, cilantro, sage, mint, dill, parsley, well, all these that you can see here, is that you can dry them. So, and they are nice. Of course, not 100% like when you eat them fresh, but they are still nice when you when you keep them dry. You can process just in the oven with a very low temperature. You can dry, or if you have a dehydrator, and you can be processing these herbs. And about these ones, they are going to save you a lot of money, especially if you keep using these ones, because sometimes you can see that you go to one of these grocery stores, and I have seen how just couple like a little bit of the rosemary or lemongrass, and it can be $5, just a little bit, a little box like this, just tiny box that is not more than 5 inches, and about $5, $6 for a little box like that. So when it's too expensive when you can be growing, I don't know, if 20, 50 times more, like the content of that little box in your garden in 1 year, and it's for free because especially plants like rosemary, mint, they are hardy ones. They don't need too much care and they just keep growing and growing and growing. So you can preserve dry. This is a nice option, or just in the refrigerator. Well, that's you start playing if probably it works for you about freezing some of these ones, but because it's not the same like freezing these ones. And yeah, just keep playing. And the nice thing about herbs is that you need a small space, so you can have some containers, little containers at home, and having multiple herbs growing in there. Well, some of them they don't like to be like in the same pot with another plants, for example with rosemary. So just keep reading about each plant. So with plants, there is not one way to grow the plants, and it's something that I always mention. So just keep playing with it, reading about it, Google it. If you're going to plant this year cilantro, carrots, onions, potatoes, read about each one of these because they are different requirements. So they are not that hard to grow, but you can be learning about how to make it even better. Now about fruit trees, it's also we can buy, also we can be producing our own fruit. Sorry. So about our own fruit, we can be producing a lot of fruit, but it's something like, well, it's growing a tree. It's not like planting tomatoes that you can just harvest in couple months. With when we're talking about fruit, about the trees, so this can be for months or years until we can start having some fruits. But something about this is that it's totally worthy because once you start growing your tree and taking care of your tree, of course, trees they need more, they need some care. So you need to be pruning, you need to be doing some cultural practices about pruning, about taking care of pests, about fertilizer, nutrition, everything. But once you start having fruit, you can have fruit for many years, sometimes decades. And your next generation is going to be collecting more of these fruits. So, of course, it's totally worthy. Here in your state, what you can be growing? Apples, berries. Well, when we're talking about easy, like right now, we're talking about berries, raspberries, and blackberries. Why not talking about like blueberries, for example, or strawberries? Because blueberries, strawberries, they need like they are not that easy. They are not the easiest. It doesn't mean that it's hard to grow them, but they need more. They are more picky about, for example, with blueberries, they need more acid soil. So the pH about 5.5. So they are more picky about the soil. And the strawberries about fertilizer, they are susceptible to slugs or some pest that can attack the strawberries, so they are not that easy to grow. That's why I don't mention these ones in this presentation, but like the easiest. But I mentioned that we also can be growing strawberries and blueberries around here. Also another easy ones, the plums and pears. So of course you can be harvesting these year by year, selling them, just preserving, or like you can have a lot of apples, pears, a lot of fruit every year, year by year, and this is when this long wait becomes worthy, and it's when finally we start harvesting our own fruits at home. Now the mix that we and there is that if this is a vegetable, this is a fruit, and is tomato. So we have three examples here about these ones. And well, so why vegetable, why fruit? So it's a fruit. So if we talk about botanic in a botanic way, it's a fruit because it comes from a flower, it has the seeds inside, and but it's also considered a vegetable because of the uh, culinary use. So that's why. And they are easy to grow. The only thing with tomatoes is about pruning. If you know how to prune tomatoes, you can have big and juicy tomatoes. So this is a workshop that we can have this year too, and it's about growing tomatoes, growing big tomatoes, also about how to grow tomatoes and not only leaves, because sometimes this can happen. And it's about nutritional. So just pruning and nutritional, and that's it. We can have a lot of tomatoes, and if this is undetermined growth, you can just keep growing and growing and growing, and every week you're harvesting tomatoes every week. So that's something nice about tomatoes. And you can preserve fresh, canned, and frozen. Something like a tip is that you don't need to wait until the tomato is red and to take the tomato from the plant. You can take it green if it's a good size. You can take it green. So in this way, it's going to last more time in the on the counter, and it's going to get red at some point. So this is one of the climateric fruits. It means that these fruits that you can pick green from the plant, and they just keep that process getting this maturation process. So that's something nice about tomatoes, and you can start the plants right now. in the spring, just indoors. And when the temperature is just 60 degrees or above, you can just move the plants to directly to the garden, and that's it. It's so simple to grow the tomatoes, and they produce a lot. So this is one of probably my favorite plant to be growing every year. I always grow tomatoes, and about 16 to 80 days after planting, you can keep getting tomatoes, and every week you're getting tomatoes. Even if you take the challenge to be growing these indoors, making sure that they have their light, even if it's artificial light and humidity. These plants, especially the varieties that they are undetermined, you just put a rope and they can keep growing and growing and growing. And you can have tomatoes all year round. This is how it's produced under these big greenhouses. They just produce tomatoes for a year, and the plants they keep growing and keep producing every week. That's something nice. You can produce about, if it's talking about summer to yeah, the end of spring, summer, just in one season you can be producing about 12 to 20 pounds of tomatoes per plant. So that's a lot. And if you keep growing, you can have more tomatoes every year. Another vegetable fruit here is the peppers. So they are like the same family than tomatoes, peppers, so all kind of peppers. Sweet peppers, banana peppers, serrano peppers. Here, this example that we can see on the screen is serrano peppers, and they are easy to grow. Of course, they are susceptible. They are a little bit more susceptible to pests and some diseases. That's the only thing that you need to be paying attention to the plants. And once you start producing the peppers, you can you can preserve fresh, canned, or frozen, and you can start planting right now, just about 1 month, more or less 1 month before the last frost, and take it outdoors when the temperature is 65 degrees Fahrenheit, and 70 to 90 days after planting, you can start having your peppers. So this about the yield, this is an example just for the serrano pepper that is like the jalapeno, but this one is spicier. And you can have about 30 to 50 peppers just in one plant. So this is something nice. Peppers can produce a lot, and this is why it's also considered abundant. And you can dry them, you can process or just store it frozen or canned. And you can have peppers. You don't need to buy more peppers in the store. Another one, fruit, vegetable, is cucumbers. So they are easy, fast to grow. If you see the cucumbers, they just keep growing. If you close the fence or in a rope, and they just keep growing and growing and growing. And once you start harvesting, you can process like canned, fresh. You can eat them fresh and also freeze them. They are okay if you freeze them too. Of course, not the same texture, but still they can be preserved in that way. And now is the time to start planting between just late April to May, the beginning of May. And 50 to 70 days after planting, you start having some cucumbers in the garden. It's abundant, about 1 to 3 pounds per plant, and they don't take much space in the garden, so you can plant just a few seedlings or seeds in the garden, and you can be having more and more cucumbers. So this is also why it's an abundant plant. Now, something that we have like as a perennial that also is considered abundant, this is the example for today, is rhubarb. So with rhubarb, it's a long wait, almost like the trees, because you plant it and you don't expect to get rhubarb in the first year. So you need to wait 2 years and then you start harvesting the rhubarb. So just plant. You can start planting in the spring or the late fall, because well, it's up to you. You just decide the spring or late fall and wait 2 years until you can start harvesting the rhubarb. But once it start producing and you can start harvesting, they can produce 2 to 6 pounds per plant every season. And of course, they don't take like a lot of space, so you can put them together. The plants, they can be perfectly, they are fine being together. So you can have multiple plants in a small space. Something that I have to mention here is that, for example, we were talking about beets, you can, or onions, you can eat the whole plant. With this one, this is the exception, because with rhubarb, the leaves are poisonous, so they have some toxicity in there. It's not like if you eat rhubarb leaves, are you're going to die, like having cyanide or something like that. No, it's not that extreme, but you can have some stomach issues. Also, they can produce some toxicity in the kidneys. So take care about this one. And about this, the stems, they are perfectly okay and they are not toxic at all. It's only the leaves, and because they have oxalic acid. So this is the compound that in an industrial way it's nice, because it's used to clean the floors and, well, many products, but not for us to eat. And, well, once you start producing, you can have rhubarb for long time. This is one of the plants that they can last for 20 to 25 years or more, and they keep growing and they keep producing a lot of rhubarb. So these ones, they were the easiest ones, the easiest plants and abundant plants that I wanted to share with you today, that we can be growing here in your state and that you can grow a lot of them, and they are not that difficult to be preserving, with the exception of the greens, for example. Other than that, you can be producing a lot. Even if it's a small space, you can produce a lot. Now there is a system that, just like a fun fact, something that I wanted to share also, that is an indigenous American agriculture system called Three Sisters Farming. Probably you know about this one. And if you don't know, so this is about planting three plants together. So planting corn first. When the corn start growing, so you plant pumpkins. So the pumpkins use the stalks, the corn stalks, to like support, and then you plant the beans on the bottom like a cover crop. So in this way, the beans keep the pest far from the pumpkins and the corn, and also the beans always help the soil. So always help in the process of um, soil health. That, well, this is a cycle that I'm not going to explain today, but it's good for the health, the soil health. And after the time when it's time to harvest, so you collect three of them, and then there is a soup. So with the pumpkins, the corn, and the beans, you can make a soup called the Three Sisters soup. So it's highly nutritional, and also it's a way to be growing three species, three different plants in a small space, using the same space to be growing multiple things at the same time. So this is something that you can be using. For example, if you have the space and it's you can get direct sunlight, you can be growing some corn plants and be something like this, be growing a system like this. And like this, there are many systems that you can plant using this difference between a tall plant, a medium one, and a small one, like a cover crop. Now, well, some tips, recommendations about this one, about how to produce your food in an abundant way. This is the difference when we are talking, for example, the workshops, when I'm talking how to start a garden, because we can be talking about multiple plants, and, yeah, just to have some vegetables, some fruits, and flour, something that, well, is not that. But today we are focused about food, and a lot of food possible, the highest quantity amount of food possible, with not much money, with a small space, even if we have a small space or indoors in pots. So this is something nice, and some recommendations is buy local plants. This is the number one recommendation. Why buying local plants? Because they are already adapted to your area. So remember that here in New York State we have microclimates. So it's not the same growing something here that in Allegheny County, than growing something in another county, or growing something in New York State, sorry, New York City. So it's different. We have microclimates. So when you go with your local um, nursery, you can find plants that they are already adapted. They are growing in there. So they are already adapted. They are not going to be stressed if we move them to our house. And all these save time and effort and sometimes pesticides, and because when a plant is stressed, it's easy that it gets pest diseases. So what we are like, our goal is to produce a lot of food, just not, and same time saving money. So when we get the plants, and this is another of the recommendations here, and is that if our plant is sick or it has some pest, some insects or something in there, we are going to be spending more money and time just trying to control that pest. So that's not our goal. So make sure that you have some healthy plants from the nursery. And how to do that? Just check the plant. And if there is some brown spots or some that you can see that definitely that plant is not growing fine, is not good compared with another plants. If you check a little bit the plant, and then some white, for example, the white flies that is so easy to catch, they just keep flying, or you see just little black or green spots like just walking around the plant. So they are probably aphids. So if you find aphids or these insects, something like that, just avoid that, because it's a headache later to try to control that, and also just spending more money about that. So this is going to save you money, time, and effort in the future. And start small. This is also the second recommendation, is to start small, because sometimes we can have just a package of seeds. So we have 50 seeds in a package, just an example. And then, okay, I'm going to plant 20 of them. And then you find, especially for example, squash. So, and then you just have 5 plants or 10 plants, and they just become like 40 plants. So in this way, start small, because you just be playing year by year. So okay, now next year I need to reduce less plants of this, more seeds of that, more seedlings of this plant or the other one. That's the best way. Always keep a track. Keep also a journey, a gardening journal, a notebook, something that you can be year by year just taking notes what is happening in your garden. And start small. And if you have, like I mentioned in the beginning, the black thumb, find support. It doesn't mean that you cannot, that, oh no, I'm too terrible to be a gardener. No, it's just that you need to learn more about that. And it can take years. Like many of us, I have been like about 14 years learning about gardening and going to university. And after all these years, even still, I keep learning and learning. So that's something that never stops. You can be learning and learning. And at some point, that black thumb is going to become in a green thumb. So you can be a gardener. And so, how to do that? Just join, be a volunteer with some groups. There are some community gardens. There are some groups, for example, you always can find. In, if we are talking here in New York State, you can be, um, you can go with the Cornell Cooperative Extension Office. In every county, there are programs like the one that I'm going to show you here. That is the Master Gardener program, and you can be a volunteer. So growing in community. So this is nice that you can share your knowledge, and also when once you learn a couple things, you can be now the teacher for another community or someone else that is just starting this process. So you can volunteer, and in this process you are learning and also helping others. So this is a nice way to be a volunteer, to be learning. And if you want to become a master gardener volunteer, so for Allegheny County, we are doing the training in 2023 in the fall. So this is a link, or you can take the picture to this QR code and just express your interest to become a master gardener volunteer. And this is all for today. Try to put everything in just less than an hour to start producing some abundant garden and producing a lot of food. So let's see how we do this year. Now we have 3 minutes for questions. If you have some questions, you can unmute your microphone and do it right now.
I was able to find that image and upload it to the chat if you wanted to share. It's just a fun image to look at. It might be a fun thing for kids to do, but also an interesting way to start plants, not from seed, but from using scraps from root vegetables and lettuces and stuff.
Oh yeah. Also lettuce, yeah. Yeah, that's nice. You see, for example, here in this onion, we have 2 plants from one bulb, one onion. So using the tops, this is nice. Yeah, so thank you for sharing that one.
Sure.
It works especially well with celery, I found. It pops up in like 2 or 3 days, and then you can harvest leaves and small stalks, and it's fun. It's just so much fun.
Interesting. I love celery. So,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, probably we can start growing that, because yeah, with celery, I haven't done that yet. So this year, that's the year to start trying that one too. Okay, another question.
I'm all set. That was really informative. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So thank you so much.
Thanks for the artwork was impeccable. I really enjoyed just the slides and the photos.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your feedback. Any other question, something that you have about gardening? Like this challenge sometimes can be a challenge about the like when you have the black thumb. So just persistence, and you can become make that black thumb in a green thumb. So I'll see you in the next workshop. We always are around and happy to help. So I hope to see you soon. Thank you for being here, and bye bye. Have a good day.
Thanks. I'll
Thank
see
you,
you Saturday.
Christian.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye, Debbie.
Bye-bye. Bye.